What did we learn from the divisional round of the playoffs that can relate back to the Browns, and why one team still in the playoffs should provide hope for the future for Browns fans? All that and more coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dog Pound, I'm Spencer German, proudly your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Is the bridge quarterback option officially dead in the water after this weekend's playoff games? Also, from the number 2 pick to the NFC Championship game, the Commanders have provided a blueprint for the Browns. It may not be that easy to follow, though. We'll talk about it. Ranking the Browns' biggest needs after the quarterback position, also on the docket for today. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast and making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. Let's get after it, Browns fans. And I do think a natural starting place on a Monday, a holiday Monday nonetheless, on MLK Day here today, is taking a look back at divisional round weekend and finding out sort of what we learned as just kind of bystanders about this Browns team and you know what kind of lies ahead in the state of the NFL. And I think that the obvious takeaway from everything that played out this weekend, and it's going to sound like a broken record here because it's the thing that everybody always talks about. You can only go so far in this league if you don't have that franchise quarterback, if you don't have that elite level quarterback. I mean, look around in this sport. Look around in the division alone where you have Joe Burrow and obviously Steelers dealing with sort of a quarterback purgatory situation of their own. But there are so many good quarterbacks in this division. There are so many good quarterbacks in the AFC. Josh Allen, who just beat Lamar Jackson on Sunday. Patrick Mahomes, obviously we know how great he is. I'm probably forgetting some people. Justin Herbert's a guy that's been considered sort of like an on-the-rise type of player. Now you got some new faces like Bo Nix had a really good rookie season. So there are just, you look around this league and you see team after team with great quarterbacks. And that goes for the NFC as well, where I do think the Commanders' win over the Lions was maybe one of the most telling results of the season on a number of fronts. We are going to get into Washington specifically here coming up. So I don't want to go too far down that path just yet. But what I found interesting about that game is that Jared Goff kind of represented what's the right word? Like the quote unquote game manager or like non-elite quarterbacks or the reclamation projects, I guess is a good way to put it. Like that's kind of when he came to Detroit, he was viewed as kind of this reclamation project guy who's getting a chance somewhere, but nobody thought he was an elite quarterback. And then because of the team that they built around him, because Ben Johnson has been brilliant in the way that he's called that offense and you know, got Jared Goff playing at such a high level and having that offense just put up massive points and just dominating teams. And they did do that on Saturday despite the loss. I mean, they still put up a ton of points. People have maybe, you know, I think there's been a narrative shift about Jared Goff where they thought like, okay, maybe he does belong in that top 10 conversation. But when push came to shove on a big stage like that on Saturday night, he wilted under the pressure a little bit. He had some turnovers, he was the Jared Goff that Sean McVay decided wasn't good enough to win Super Bowls in LA, that he traded away. And that was just kind of like a throw-in piece for the deal to land Matthew Stafford. And you know, that we didn't necessarily think would be the franchise quarterback in Detroit. We thought he would just kind of be there for a little while, bridge the gap, and move on. But to me, like if you're looking around the league and looking for reclamation projects, and we know the Browns are kind of in a situation where they might be sort of assessing their options to do something similar. Goff was the poster child for it. He was the person you pointed to and said, look, there are quarterbacks that you can acquire in this league that are maybe just considered average, that you can raise their game based on the offense that they play in. And that's not to say that what he has done these last couple of years in Detroit hasn't been great, and that he doesn't and that he deserves to lose his job after this playoff loss. They should go get a different quarterback. No, I'm not saying that. I'm pretty sure Detroit's going to run it back with them. They feel good about it, even though Ben Johnson's probably going to be gone because he's likely to get a head coaching gig. There is some truth to that. But I think Jared Goff has largely dispelled some of the narratives about him, and I think he can still play quarterback at a high level. So I'm not saying it's completely out of the question, but I do think on some level, what we saw from Goff, what we saw from Sam Darnold in his last two games, including the playoff game on Wild Card Weekend against the Packers, they played the Rams against the Rams. It was a testament to the reclamation project quarterback may not actually be a viable one for teams that are actually chasing championships. That doesn't mean that the Browns aren't going to go that route this offseason. That doesn't mean that because they don't have, and frankly, Cleveland doesn't have a lot of options at their disposal, as we know right now. The Sean deal, they already tried to cut the line and trade for a franchise quarterback. You're not going to be able to do that right now or again. You basically got to draft one, and they are in position to potentially draft one. But we know what's being said about this draft class. I've talked about it with you here on the show. It's going to continue to be said. Hit or miss. There's two guys that everybody really likes. The rest are sort of, we're not sure. And even the two guys that everyone seems to like, there's some flaws there and some reasons why they might not turn into the franchise quarterbacks that you're looking for, on top of other factors like whether or not Deion Sanders would even let his son play for the Cleveland Browns if he's there at number 2. So there's a lot of sort of things in play here. So theoretically, yes, they could turn around their quarterback misfortunes by drafting the right guy in April. That could happen. But if they don't, or if they decide we don't like this class and we're going to sort of build differently, then the reclamation project quarterback option, that's kind of what the Browns have to work with right now. So they still might end up going this route this offseason and seeing how far they can take it. A trip back to the playoffs, I think, steadies the waters, calms everybody down. Everybody gets to keep their job, all those different things. So if that's kind of the goal, fine. But for a team that still has a roster that was, touted as being a championship contender this year, there are bigger, higher aspirations for this group, and they are supposed to sort of be in that ilk. So the only way to land that quarterback is ultimately to draft one, most likely. And I think that this weekend was just evidence of, if you don't have one of the elites, your championship aspirations are kind of, they're a long shot. They're a pipe dream. Jared Goff wilts on a stage where Detroit had everything working in their favor to try to, other than obviously injuries, to try to make a run to the Super Bowl. You had home field advantage, all these different things, and you lose at home as the number 1 seed in the divisional round to a sort of an upstart Commanders team. It's the same thing. Sam Darnold in the previous round, everything looked good until the last couple games of the season that mattered the most to that team. And then he reverted back to being the Sam Darnold of old. A tiger doesn't change its stripes in that way. And so, again, you're looking around this league. You're seeing Jaden Daniels maybe becoming, or on a trajectory towards becoming the best quarterback in the NFC. You see the division with 2 elite quarterbacks in it who were in the MVP conversation at least a little bit for Burrow. Obviously, Lamar's in that conversation. You look around the AFC in general, and you got to go through, no matter what year it is, you're going to have to go through a gauntlet of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow when the Bengals make it. That's not an easy thing. And so I almost kind of sat there watching these games wondering, they might have to do the bridge thing. They might have to do the reclamation project or give Sam Darnold another go in a different uniform, whatever that might be. Maybe Kirk Cousins at the age of nearly 40. That might be the only option they have this offseason specifically. But as long as they're, but that path, that route is not going to win you a Super Bowl. And that was the big thing I took away, was at some point the Browns are going to have to draft a quarterback. And I'm sure there's plenty of Browns fans, maybe yourself, who sat there and said, this is why. You probably saw the same thing I saw. And you probably said to yourself, this is why they do need to draft a quarterback at 2, because it's the only way you're going to turn around the franchise fast enough and get that guy in here that can be a true frontline starting quarterback, quarterback everybody's dreamed of having in this town for years that can compete on that stage with the best of the best. And I understand that's your thought process and your mindset. I just don't know how realistic that is until we get a better sense of how they feel about this quarterback class and the two guys at the front of it in Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. We'll have plenty of time to dissect those things even further as the weeks and months roll on leading up to the draft, obviously. But on top of learning that from this weekend, and if that is the route they do go, if they go the route of drafting a quarterback, there is one team left, I mentioned them in this segment, in the postseason that does provide the blueprint and some signs of hope for the Browns and Browns fans. We will talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. Let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in with the strongest hiring data available. LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. LinkedIn connects you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else, from unique skills and interest to the connections you share. LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of businesses say LinkedIn has helped them hire and find high-quality candidates. Hire smarter this year and find the next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks. And if you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. This past week, I had Saquon Barkley for more than one touchdown. That one hit. He had two. And he's likely to do that again because he's been brilliant this season. Next week against the Commanders, they also have weekly promos like their Taco Tuesday discounts to add even more value to your lineup. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app, use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play the first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. So along with learning that these in the NFL, you can't really win in this league, and you're going to have a tough time winning on the biggest stage in the playoffs without an elite quarterback. We saw one team that acquired an elite quarterback merely a year ago in the NFL draft, less than a year ago, really, and the Washington Commanders, who drafted Jaden Daniels, and the rest is history. Here they are in the NFC Championship game 1 year after having the number 2 overall pick. And so for obvious reasons, they become the blueprint for Browns fans. They become the blueprint for where the Browns can maybe go from here and how quickly you can turn this thing around. Now, I said it last segment. I don't know, and we'll find out here moving forward how they feel about this draft class. And it's kind of unfortunate because it kind of feels like last year was the year to have a top 10 pick or have the number 2 overall pick, because you would have had the rights to Jaden Daniels, given that Caleb Williams was going number 1 overall to the Bears. So that's important to keep in mind. Like, just because you are number 2 doesn't mean that like all things are equal. From last year where the Commanders were there to this year when the Browns were there. Commanders had their pick of the litter between and what was considered and regarded as a really good, elite even quarterback class. Caleb Williams is supposed to be good. I think he showed some signs this year. Tough situation in Chicago. We'll see if he can turn it around. Jaden Daniels, I think, has been the best of the group so far. But as I mentioned, Bo Nix made the playoffs. Drake May showed some promise for the New England Patriots. Like, that class had some studs and some guys that could become the next great quarterbacks in this league on their respective teams and their respective conferences. So it's not apples to apples going from like last year to this year and saying, well, you're number 2. Look what Washington did. You got to take a quarterback. But it is encouraging to see a team pull off what the Commanders did this year. And I get there was a lot of changes there. Changing owner, changing coach, changing a lot of different things. But on top of the quarterback position. But it goes to show you that, like, once you land that guy, once you have that guy, your expectations can go through the roof. And, frankly, you can turn this thing around really, really quickly, which is why, again, With the Browns sitting at number 2 this year, there's a lot of excitement around that pick because, it is an opportunity for Cleveland to potentially change the fate of their franchise really, really quickly if they land the right quarterback and they hit on the right player there. But it comes down to how they feel about these guys, and that's the biggest thing. I don't know that there's somebody who projects to be Jaden Daniels in this draft. All accounts are from the scouts and the people that have studied this stuff. This quarterback draft class is being compared more to 2022 with Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis, more so than it is being compared to last year, where you obviously had, this group of great quarterback talents that everybody wanted. And by the time the round, Jaden Daniels' stock sort of slowly rose throughout the offseason. He was considered one of the top guys, once college football was over for the season, but gradually he sort of ascended to being comparable to Caleb Williams, so much so that if you watch the offseason Hard Knocks with the Giants, you heard Joe Shane, GM for New York, wanting to trade up with New England to try to have a shot at somebody like Jaden Daniels. Like, they really wanted Jaden Daniels. Didn't happen. Washington stays there, and they take him. And so he wasn't even on the board for a team like New England or the Giants that they were able to trade up to even take. But it's life, and the lifeblood of the NFL is finding and developing around and building a team around a franchise quarterback. And I think it's to see Washington go from what they were, a laughing stock of a franchise, the worst run organizations in the sport, to quickly being a playoff team that's now in a win away from the Super Bowl with a rookie quarterback that is a phenom that everybody has sort of fallen in love with this season. It is the ultimate path that everyone is going to point to and say that can be the Browns. And I get why. There's a lot of hope there. I think it's beautiful and special that they do sort of provide the blueprint for you of what the Browns can do and how quickly this thing can turn around if you identify that quarterback. The problem is that quarterback has to be there, and that we don't know. I've already said it. I think Shedeur Sanders is the better fit of the two. There's a lot that comes with that. Is Deion Sanders going to let his son play for the Browns? There's been rumors kind of percolating throughout the offseason already about what teams he would or wouldn't let his son play for, because we know he's going to they're going to sort of try to dictate where he ends up and, where he plays, because it's about his future. Deion wants to kind of have some control of that, of where he goes. And so if the Browns end up being off the table, are you really going to take a guy who doesn't want to be there and is probably going to force his way out anyway? No. And so that leaves you with, if that ends up happening, then your option's Cam Ward. If Cam Ward goes 1, he might not even be there. On top of the fact that Cam Ward might not be a fit for you. It's a fine line. It's a tough thing because you do have to draft for what is going to fit your team at the moment and what you're going to be able to tap into from a talent perspective. But at the same time, it's hard not to, ride the coattails of the Commanders and feel like, man, look how quickly you can change this thing around. And it was the thing that I spun. I said that all season long, that the Commanders were the blueprint. That was the team that is when everyone was arguing back and forth over whether or not they should tear it all down to the studs and start over or try to sort of figure it out and stay competitive. My biggest point was, look at the Commanders. You draft the right quarterback, you land the right quarterback, sky's the limit for you. Everything changes if that happens. They're in a position to do that. They're in a very unique position to do that. I just worry about, again, the draft classes aren't the same. And if you don't pick the right guy, then you set yourself back for a long time. So there's a number of things that come into play. The Browns have to know or feel like they can identify and land that guy at number 2 in this class that is weaker than last year's class. If they do, great. Maybe the Browns could be the next Commanders and this thing could turn around quickly. But if not, where they go from there, I think goes back to the first segment we had, which is, I think you're sort of stuck with a bridge option or a veteran sort of journeyman coming in and trying to sort of just bridge things for you to get you maybe back to the playoffs. And then you maybe figure out what you're going to do with the quarterback position next year. That might not be as easy when you don't have the number 2 overall pick. You're going to have to probably make a trade to move up the board. All those things are very true. But this is the situation the Browns are in. And I do think they got to assess everything and sort of dole it out. They can't just go into it assuming, well, hey, look what the Commanders did. Let's be like them and draft a quarterback. Because listen, the Commanders, They drafted the right quarterback for themselves. Credit to them. They finally were able to do that. They finally were able to identify a guy, and they did it right. But if the roles were reversed, they would have to know that they were picking the right guy. You can't just pick a guy to pick a guy. And that's kind of the big point I keep kind of going back to is I get why they give you some sign of hope. And there is, again, I still think that's the reason why you don't strip it all down to the studs and start all over. Because at any moment, if you get a chance, you could find that quarterback, and that might be this year. But you also got to know that you're getting the right guy. Washington got the right guy. Props to them. They give you they show you that there's a path to turning things around, and they show you that there's a path to being a perennial Super Bowl team quicker than maybe some think the Browns could be. But again, it has to be the right situation. It has to be the right fit, or else you could set the organization back even further than they already are right now. With that said, we know quarterback is the biggest need for the Browns this offseason. Let's rank the other biggest needs for the Cleveland Browns. We will do it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300. That's now $300 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Win or lose, the FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate and has a variety of bets that keeps everything exciting throughout the game and the NFL playoffs. I'm a big anytime touchdown parlay builder. I actually didn't do that this weekend, though, but I did almost hit on a different parlay between the Lions and the Commanders. It was spoiled because Washington won. I needed the Lions money line. I had an alternate money line to hit. It didn't, but hey, there's always next weekend. We got Conference Championship weekend coming. There'll be plenty of reason to get back into FanDuel and play some more bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we've talked so much about quarterbacks on this show in recent episodes, recent weeks. We know it's the number one position of need. I just laid it out. We watched the games this weekend. The teams that have the elite quarterbacks are the teams that are playing for Super Bowls and have the best chance to win Super Bowls. So yes, we know the Browns need a quarterback. They very well might take one at number 2 overall and change their fortunes forever, much like the Commanders. But that doesn't mean they don't have other holes to fill. And so I think it's worth doing an exercise here where we go through and sort of rank the biggest needs of this team beyond just the quarterback position. And so we're taking quarterback out of the equation. It's off the table. From there, I think the Browns' biggest need number 1, starts with left tackle. This is no surprise. Jedrick Wills, that whole experience as the number 1 overall pick for Andrew Berry, his first year here, did not work out. He was injured again this year. It would be stunning if they actually brought him back in any capacity next year. I think that ship has sailed. I think they know that ship has sailed. The inconsistent play over the years it's too much of a cross for this team to bear. They can't possibly bring him back and expect him to develop any at this point. You're 5 years into this thing. He's still giving you a lot of the same problems. And it's a miss by Andrew Berry to kind of wear here. He's got to go out and try to make amends for that busted draft pick. Now, again, if they take quarterback at 1, I think this is off the table. But there's somebody like Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas who could be in play early on in the first round as a tackle. Will Campbell is another one from LSU. The problem with that is he's kind of projecting more as a guard. But again, maybe he can play tackle at the NFL. We'll see. But there are some options there in the draft. But I do think that is need number 1 if you're taking quarterback out of the equation for this team, because it's a massive hole. We know how important that position is. We know this offensive line had some problems last year. They got to get back to being that dominant bruising group that they are. And because of that, I also do think that, you're getting back, or along those lines, I should say, you're getting back into running Kevin Stefanski style of offense. You need good offensive linemen to do that. And so left tackle becomes a massive need for this team going into the draft and the offseason and all that. So that to me is number 1 on the non-QB needs list. Number 2, and this might surprise some people, but I did talk about this a little bit when I referenced Abdul Carter. I think a defensive end is it is a higher priority than some people might believe. They have been doing this rent a vet program to sort of pair somebody with Myles Garrett over the years, and it's worked to an extent. Like, you got some good play out of Jadeveon Clowney when they had him. Obviously, Jadarius Smith the last couple of years was solid and was probably the best, opposite of Myles Garrett companion that he's ever had. But think about it. Like, you can never have too many defensive linemen. It's one of the most premium positions in the sport. You could use a young guy to pair with him that for like years to come could just wreak havoc. And with Myles Garrett sort of, throwing up warning signs that he wants to, if he's going to stay in Cleveland, their priorities and goals all sort of have to align at the same time. You can start sort of planning for the future if that future does not include Myles Garrett, by having a young, up-and-coming, really talented pass rusher to sort of build around moving forward. I'm not saying that guy would be Myles Garrett, but it's still nice to know that you'd have sort of like some depth there and a young guy there to blaze a new path into the future, again, depending on what happens with Myles Garrett. So I think defensive end is higher than people are giving it credit for. My number 3 on the list of non-quarterback biggest needs is running back. Now, you might be asking yourself, like, why running back over wide receiver? I'm looking around and seeing other needs for this team. But the reason I think running back is a big need, and just because I'm saying this doesn't mean they have to address it in the draft either. I think they probably will draft a running back, probably not in the first round. I think you can put the Ashton Jeanty dreams away. I don't think they're drafting Ashton Jeanty. But the reason why running back is such a big need, in my opinion, is because, again, just think about the system, think about what they're doing. They're pivoting back to what Kevin Stefanski likes to do. And his offense is very outside zone heavy. They do like to run the ball, and they sort of use the run to set the pass. Then they get into the play action stuff. And so, yes, beyond the quarterback position, which is still most important to running the system, having a running back that can be a force for you in a future sort of player at that position is important for the Browns. I don't mean that as a disrespect or a slight to Nick Chubb. I just think at this point, the injuries are piled up. We don't know what Nick Chubb you're going to get. I've already put my name, etched it in stone. I think the take that Nick Chubb will be back next year with the Browns. I don't think that's a worry. I just don't know what you can expect to get from Nick Chubb. So you got to have some contingency plans. You got to have some options sort of behind him coming up and, coming through the ranks here and that you can develop. So I do think running back becomes a pretty important need for this team as they pivot back to, this Kevin Stefanski system. Then I think wide receivers up there. I don't think this is as pressing because of the emergence of Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy impressed me. He had a really good season this year. I think he proved he can be a number 1 wide receiver on this team or in the NFL in general. And so I'm willing to sort of go into the year with him as the number 1. And I think this wide receiver that you're looking at would be like a number 2 option, a guy that can play sort of complementary to Jerry Jeudy more. And so, yeah, I do think that's on the list. I don't know if it's above some of these others. And then right now, 5th on the list, and this could change, is linebacker. And this truly all revolves around what happens with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I don't know what the future holds for him. Nobody seems to know, except maybe the Browns, and they're just not really letting on what it is, because every time they're asked about him, they give this very vague answer on, well, he's gathering information. And that's never, that feels very ominous. I don't like the sense of what his future holds. We hope he can play football again. He's a tremendous player, and he's a tremendous person on top of that. He's great. So I hope his career isn't over, because I want to continue to see him play football. Obviously, I want to be okay first and foremost. But yeah, like that could be a major hole that emerges for the Browns if JOK is truly, in some sort of situation where his career might be in jeopardy. The same thing sort of applies to different reason, but guard. Joel Bitonio could retire. That could put that position on this list or higher on this list as well, because I don't know how they feel about Zach Zinter at this point. Maybe they think he's the guy for the future, but I do wonder if there's still something sort of to be desired there. We'll see. But I do think guard could become something that's also on this list, depending on what happens there. But we'll have to wait and see what Joel Bitonio decides to do. That is going to do it. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team here season. And there'll be plenty more to talk about in the weeks and months ahead. I hope you continue to make the Locked On Browns podcast your first listen every day. For your second listen, go on and check out one of the new Locked On NFL shows, or If you want to keep it local, you can check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon. But for now, I'm out. Catch you later.